Welcome, guys, to Contrarian Daily. My name is Jake Julius. This is Chris Jong, and we are going to be talking a little bit today about digital passports and the fact that the WHO is, and it's not mysterious, it's the World Health Organization, not asking, is going to be doing. They want to get involved in creating this digital global vaccine passport. So
just when you thought it was over, it was all about the Ukraine and Russia and that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden they're hauling us back to the vaccine mandates and things like that.
Coming to our aid.
Yes, that's exactly right. They're coming to the rescue.
Yes, exactly. When we're damsels in distress who just need to have it all in one spot and have it globalized.
That's right. Look, Putin just needs to work harder to kill COVID once and for all. He's done good so far. He's done a good effort, but he needs to just get a little bit further.
Yeah, 100%. But no, plenty going on in the news at the moment. But I'd say that's the thing that's really caught my eye this week is the fact that you've got. I saw Russell Brand talking about it today about the fact that the WHO are trying to get involved and make this a sort of a global. And this is day one of what the conspiracy theorists were saying.
100%.
This is what they're saying. Okay, it's going to be a global credit system, and then we're going to talk more about the centralized bank. And the
digital currency,
there, and how they can sort of switch on and off what you can buy, et cetera, et cetera. You've been following a lot of the Ice Road Trucker, and this is basically the social credit system.
Ice Road Trucker.
Should have let me roll with it.
Yeah, so I probably should have.
It's a good show. And basically, this is in a nutshell what we're thinking when we're saying things like it's going to be, a global,
total control, essentially.
Yeah.
And there's that, I think it's a Henry Kissinger quote, I think it is, that he who controls the money controls the world. So there's the quote that gets thrown around a lot is he who controls the food controls the population. But then there's something else where it goes, he who controls the money controls the world is the extension of that quote as well. So if they control the money through this digital currency, they essentially do control the world. So yes. For me, it's a very terrifying prospect.
And do you want to explain a little bit about the digital currency, what it is?
Yeah. So essentially, the CBDC, central bank digital currency, and what they're going to do is kind of like cryptocurrencies, but for the central banks. So essentially, all the purchases will be done online through this process, and it's going to be programmable, and that's a very, very important word. So with it being programmable, that means that they can change what you can and can't spend that money on. So a lot of people are speculating, which I tend to agree with. It's going to come down to a lot about your carbon usage and your food usage as well, in particular meats and things like that. So you'll go to buy your meats or you go to buy your petrol, and it's like, no, you've spent too much on petrol or meat for the time being. You can't pay for it using this digital currency. The other thing, it's also going to be at the discretion of the government and your employer as well. Now, what that's doing, in my opinion, is it's setting it up for the ESG scores. So ESG, I think we talked a little bit about that last week. The ESG is the environmental, social, and governance score. Now, what that's going to do, that applies to the company that it applies to, but it also applies to their staff. And so when they're saying this digital currency is going to be at the discretion of the employer, that's going to be how they can force you to do these ESG things to maintain the company as well. The other thing as well is it'll be, they'll be able to put an expiry date on the currency as well. So if they want to stimulate the economy and get people spending, they'll say, look, this money in your account, this percentage, whatever that is, by this date here, it's not going to be usable anymore. So that's going to force people to go out there and spend their money, and it's terrible.
And then it's also, you can think about it as like the start of the UBI system as well.
100%.
I mean, if you are then literally relying on the government to top up your fund every week or whatever 100%. That is, and then all of a sudden, we don't have cash anymore. It's all digital, and basically they can control exactly what you do with your money, how much money you have, and then on a dime they can take it away.
Correct. Well, think about like Centrelink, right? How dependent they are on that, and then they basically control the people using Centrelink, and that's going to be the case for everyone. Have you ever wondered where the middle class is going?
Yeah.
So that's what they need to do. They need to destroy the middle class.
Well, it's happening, and I think
it is. Yeah.
I think John Howard had a great middle class. Were you saying this?
Yeah, they were saying this last week. Yeah, that's right.
And like nowadays, the middle and it doesn't really seem to be something that's valued anymore.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
it is.
Another thing that I always wonder about this is why is the carbon footprint going to be one of the things? Because I was having a debate the other day with one of my friends who works in climate tech. And I actually I don't mind that climate tech, because
nothing wrong with that.
Technology, helping the environment, whatever, and there's some very smart people. And I think that if there is a way that we're going to get out of this mess, it's going to be through technology. I'm fully in that boat. I don't think it's going to be through government regulation, etc. I think that it'll be through technology. It'll be through human ingenuity if we are going to solve the issue of our impact on the climate.
Yeah, I think it's entrepreneurs developing that tech from the grassroots,
exactly,
not the big corporates.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And entrepreneurs who are doing climate technology are going to, I think they will be the ones who sort of figure things out. Definitely not bureaucrats who want. And then so basically the argument was, I said to her, well, I'm not really on board with the carbon tax. And she looked at me like, what do you mean you're not on board with the carbon tax? And I said, well, I mean, you're basically putting money in the government's pocket. If you think about it, like, what are you actually doing? You're just giving money to the government. That's all it is. And 100%. If you think that they're doing it as a means to save the climate, then you're absolutely kidding yourself. Because if there was actually a measured, if people actually cared about the climate, they would be looking in one place, and that's China.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they are by far the biggest emitters of CO2 or what is it? Carbon. I'm so well versed in it
for us lay people.
But yes, bad things in air. That's right. But yeah, so if they were looking, if they really cared about it, they'd be looking there.
Yeah.
And we have to be realistic at some point, and we have to think about our impact on the climate and how we can mitigate that threat. But at the same time, we have to understand that, like, moving our society forward should be paramount at this stage, and economics should be paramount. And we're kind of seeing that with the virtue signaling from Joe Biden in shutting down the Keystone pipeline, and now Germany is saying, hold on a second, let's start, stop this whole green stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think the climate is being used as a means of control, because without some sort of emergency, they can't exert their emergency powers. There's no doubt the climate's changing. The climate changes, in my belief anyway, it's a natural part of history and the way that it's always been. And notice as well, like, they went from global warming and then the hole in the ozone layer, they all got debunked. So now they're using climate change.
They thought there was going to be another ice age.
That's right, global cooling. That's right. So now there's like, okay, well, it's not getting hotter, it's not getting colder to the degree they said it would. This is going to change, because you can't argue with that. It's always changing. So look, in my opinion, I think the reason why they're going with carbon and the climate is because it's a large existential. Hey, Primewide. Yes, thank you very much.
Hey, Chris, nice to see you, mate.
Good to see you there, mate. But yeah, look, this whole climate thing, it's an existential emergency, right? And a crisis. And when there's a crisis and emergency that big, then they can enforce, the controls that they want to enforce. Because when there's emergencies, people lean more towards authoritarian governments. This is the way it is.
Yeah, 100%. And right now we're seeing that move towards that in Europe, especially.
Yeah.
And people are just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, "Oh, yeah, Russia, Ukraine." Oh. But I wonder if we're missing what's really going on right before our eyes here, because generally when the mainstream media get behind something in such a frantic way,
they're magicians.
Yeah, there's something
over here, guys.
There's something.
We do this.
Yes, exactly right. There's something happening behind the veil, and I'm wondering what that. I'm trying to figure out what it is at the moment.
Well, I believe in the US anyway, there's been a law or a bill just passed as well, and a whole bunch of spending just put through in amongst all this. So it'd be interesting to dig deeper into that as well and see what else is going on. But I believe there's like a half a $500 billion was going towards this whole climate side of things, and it's crazy. But it'd be interesting. What was the argument that your friend had regarding the carbon tax? What were they saying?
Well, basically, they were saying that climate change is the most existential issue in the world and of our generation, and it's going to reduce the amount of CO2. But if we're being genuinely serious about it, we are a drop in the ocean in Australia. And yes, we can do our own thing, but giving them government money is not what's going to help us at all. Giving government bureaucrats money to grow a bigger bureaucracy of more woke sort of diversity and equity change managers.
Does she think the world's going to end in 12 years, like Greta?
No. I think she's actually really switched on with it. Like, the conversations I've had, she's done her research, and like there is a whole world of research to be done in that regard, in terms of like what our impact on our environment is and how we can sustainably go into the future. And one of the things that's really interesting is things like overfishing.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a-
a big
that's a
thing. Yeah,
huge one.
100%, 100%.
And that's something that we really need to manage. And I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, talking about it the other day, saying that we need to have areas in the ocean that are not.
Jordan Peterson's a big proponent of
Is
this,
he?
actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
he says that the overfishing is the big problem.
So we need to have areas in the ocean that you can't fish in. And this is kind of like what the indigenous used to do back in the day, before the settlers came, is that they used to have zones where they couldn't hunt, where nobody can hunt, and nobody could go and hunt game. And then they would do controlled burns, and then they would burn off the area that they just
Correct.
they just basically dried out, and then they would move on to the next area. And this place by this time was blossoming and lots of game. And
that's it. Well, this is like a bit of a left field thought, and this is my belief anyway, is that if you look at everything in the world, like every animal, living creature, and that sort of stuff, it all has its place, right? Everything has it's either food for something or it supplies something else. What is our purpose? And so my belief is that our purpose was supposed to be the caretakers of this whole thing, in terms of we are the only animal that can communicate with all the other animals, that can recognize all these different bits and pieces. So I do believe, similar to what like the, I guess the indigenous people and Native Americans and things like that, we are supposed to make sure things don't get out of hand, but also don't get destroyed either. And we've been doing a pretty bad job of it, but I don't think we're in an emergency.
No.
I really don't think that's the situation. So,
well, I think Peterson talks a lot about Bjorn Lomborg and his work.
I'm not familiar.
So Bjorn Lomborg wrote a book, I think it's called How to Spend $70 Billion to Make the World a Better Place. And basically what he did was he got
only 70 billion?
Yeah, it's not much.
Well, Elon Musk could pay for it.
Yeah. It's not much, is it?
Yeah,
but basically what he was doing was he got together a team of economists, and he said, per dollar, what is going to impact people in the most positive way if we spend this money? Number one was clean drinking water and the nutrition of people in developing nations. That was the foremost objective. And it makes sense, because the more people that we lift out of poverty, which has been happening at an exponential rate, like from the year 2000 to the year 2015, the global poverty halved, which is $1.90 a day, correct. UN standards, halved. I think we had, at one stage at our peak, we had 92% of people in the world had access to clean drinking water, which is fantastic. I know the birth rate in Africa, I know this is all pre-COVID. I'm not sure what's happened now with the effects of lockdowns. The birth rate in Africa pre-COVID was the same as it was in Europe in 1950s, which is a big deal, because Europe in the 1950s was, the most thriving place in the world. So if we're looking at the effects, I don't even know where have I gone with this.
I've gone way off. I was going to bring it back to the Who.
Oh, Bjorn Lomborg.
Yeah,
this is right.
Yeah.
And his book was to say where to spend the most money. And one of the most notable things was to get people out of poverty.
That's right. Yeah.
And this way we'll have more productive people in the world, and obviously if you're looking at these third world nations, you can make the most impact with the most amount of people for the least amount of dollars easily.
Yeah, correct.
And I don't know if this is true, but Bobby F. Kennedy's book seems to think that there was 10,000 people in developing nations, children, dying per month due to the effects of lockdown. And then in Western Asia, there was hundreds of thousands of children who had suffered from stunting and problems with their growth.
Well, I know in the UK, the speech pathologists, if I can use my words properly, are seeing a big increase in the number of people they're seeing, because the kids weren't learning with the masks and things like that too. So, but I think, Jordan Peterson does talk a lot about the best way to fix the climate is to improve the economic situation of the population, because if you're impoverished, you're not caring about the environment, you're burning whatever the heck you want to burn to survive. But once you start getting a bit of means behind you, that's when you start looking at longevity and things like that as well.
And I think he says that there would also be more geniuses, more people that could achieve, in terms of technology and entrepreneurship. We could have more people coming out of these countries, and you can see that at the moment. Like even China, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs that come out of China, despite all being controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, which is a shame, but it does happen. Singapore now is a thriving metropolitan of commerce. These countries are prime examples of South Korea as well, of countries that have chosen capitalism over the authoritarianism that was on literally the other side of the river to them. And they're thriving now. And we've seen that throughout the world. So the evidence is in that when countries go towards more democratic means and more capitalist means, their
There's
people
out of poverty.
And a rising tide lifts all ships as well.
Correct. Well, speaking of countries and places that we can't also go as well, what about this WHO developing this vaccine passport? What have you heard about that? Because this is the main topic we want to talk about here. So,
well, I heard Russell Brand talking about it today, and I was kind of hoping that you'd be the expert on this
Oh,
one.
really? Okay.
Yeah, I always come to pick your brains
well,
about this.
What we might do? Let's share this screen. We can go through this article together. Then everyone on the stream and us together.
And for those of you guys that are listening on Spotify, we will try and explain it as best as possible.
All right, guys.
So this is an article today that I came across, and it's called "The WHO is Working on a Global Vaccine Passport." And I'll let you take it from there.
Great. Oh, thanks. That's a great transition. Look, essentially, it's kind of like it ties in with the whole central bank digital currency, right? They want to use technology. You were speaking about earlier about technology getting us out of this mess. I agree if it's the right people developing it and enforcing it, I guess, because the developers of the technology shape the direction. So what they're looking to do, in addition to the central bank digital currency, is implement a global, vaccine passport system, which they want to. What they're talking about is that with all these mandates around the world, there's certain countries and states, like even look in Australia right now. Here in Queensland, we still can't go out to bars and clubs, I believe, if you're not vaccinated. Is that correct?
Correct.
But in New South Wales, it's all unrestricted. So for them, it's a nightmare of bureaucratic stuff trying to enforce and see what's going on where and everything. Right. So what they're saying they're trying to do here is to clean it all up, make it nice and easy.
Thank God.
That's right, exactly. I know. Lucky they're here to clean up the bureaucratic paperwork.
Yes, that's what we need.
That's exactly right. So they want to basically have some sort of like certification that's recognized around the world that, hey, yes, you have your shot, or no, you don't. Or up to date, I believe, is the right terminology here. Right. So, look at here. This is what it's actually saying here. So the different regions have the different standards, right? And what they want to try to do is make it a lot easier. There's another article I think you've got here as well. Oh, this is the bill, and we'll get to that one here as well in a bit. But look, and what it really just comes down to is literally just total control, right? And they just want total control of the population. They want total control over everything we do. We sort of went on the track of carbon and the environment before because the digital currencies with meat, right? And that sort of stuff. So essentially what they're just trying to do is have total control over every single person on Earth, which I think a lot of despots and dictators and people who want control have been wanting for a long period of time.
Oh, yeah.
But have just never had the ability. Yeah. And now with all the sort of technology we're creating, they've got the ability. Yep, click on that one. We'll get that. There we go. Back to us.
No, absolutely. And you look at many, as you said, dictators from past generations, and that's ultimately what people want. And then there is no bounds of the desire for power that people have.
Correct.
And this sounds like something straight out of Lord of the Rings, does it? But
yeah, that's right.
That's the one thing that
the one ring.
Yeah, one ring to rule.
Right, exactly.
One passport to rule them.
That's right, exactly.
It's true though, because and it doesn't surprise me anymore when I hear these things and when we talk about these things, because ultimately that's what people desire is power. And you look at a guy like Bill Gates, he was monopolized the computer industry, the software industry for a while, and now he's like the vaccine guy, and then
he'll be the climate guy as well.
Yeah, he'll be the climate guy. He'll be the everything guy, and that's all what he wants. Because for me, he's a man who has a God complex, and if he was able to play God with the world, I think he thinks he's smarter than the whole world combined. And if he was able to play God, he would do that.
Yeah, well, I think it's also part of human nature too. Because I think for us, I was thinking about this today actually. For everyone looking at this, we go, these guys are being insane, and how can they have a power complex and that sort of thing? But if we put us in those positions where we had that power and ability, a lot of us would be tempted. Not everyone, obviously, because everyone has different personalities and things like that. But I do think it's a part of the human condition. But the other thing I was thinking about is that we all play by different rules, right? So if we look at the rules they're playing by, the people in power, when they have power, they just want to hold on to it, right? They're not really interested in fixing and improving the lives of everyone else. They just want to keep that power, and they'll do whatever they can to try to keep it. And this is their chance to do that. But even look at the rules of, say, the elite investment bankers and things like that. In the 2008 global financial crisis, everyday mum and pop people lost their life savings and their pensions. the banks got bailed out, and the executives, they play by different rules. And so I think what we need to do as people is recognize the different rules that everyone's playing at, recognize the rules that we are playing at, because no matter how much we'd like to think otherwise, we can't play by their rules because we are not in their club. We are not in that circle. So we need to recognize
in the gentleman's club.
That's right. That's exactly right, which is a shame.
And sometimes I wish I was.
Yeah, that's right. Look, life would be a lot easier, wouldn't it?
It would be so much easier.
It'd be very, very different. But look, if we recognize the rules that we are playing by as the commoners, right, which is all of us watching, then we can play those rules fucking hard and as hard as we possibly can, right? I think that's what we need to do as well. And so, once these people get into these positions of power, they want to try to solidify that power. And this is going to allow them to do that. Because my belief is once this kicks in and gets locked in, it's going to be unstoppable. Because, again, you look at the power of AI and technology and all those other bits and pieces. Once this is in place, it's going to be as they say, the new world order.
Well, this is what happened with Orwell as well. And this is why 1984 is such a fantastic book and just such an insightful book by George Orwell. So if you guys haven't read that already, it's a must book at the moment. Yeah. I remember when I read it for the first time last year, and I was reading through it and thinking, "Oh my god!" Every single chapter,
book, that's so true.
I was like, I feel like I'm reading like an animated and sort of exaggerated version of what we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And then I remember one day I was sitting reading my book when these crazy mandates were in Queensland, where it said if you went outside, you had to wear a mask, no matter where you are, no matter if there's nobody, you have to wear a mask. So I was outside, literally on a grass patch by the river with nobody for hundreds of meters away, reading my book. And then I was
clearly you're a threat.
Yeah, I was endangering society. So then I was reading my book. I had my mask on my chin because I knew that there was police coming around on these little buggies. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to wear my mask right now because this is ridiculous. I'm reading my book. I want to breathe fresh air. It's a nice, beautiful summer's day. I'm reading, and then I see from around the corner the police buggy come on the river, and I couldn't believe it. I just kept going, kept reading my book. They get up to me and they're like, "Hey, mate, just got to get you to put your mask on." And I looked around me and I said, "Boys, there's no one for hundreds of meters. What the hell? What the hell is this?" And they said, "Mate, you've got to just do it. You've got to do it. These are the rules. These are the rules."
Yep.
And I said to them, "Fellas, do you want to be enforcing these sorts of rules? This is ridiculous. There's no one for hundreds of meters around me." And then they said, "Oh, we've just got to do our job, mate. We hate this stuff too." And I thought, well, you're more than happy to put the boots to people. And what happened if I refused right now? What would you do to me? Would you arrest me? Would you fine me?
Well,
when you know that it's morally incorrect what you're doing.
Do you know what's really fascinating to me is the fact that people go, "I've just got to do my job," and things like that, and I hate the rules and everything. But then you think about all the times that people dodgy the rules up, right? And there's like, "Oh, we'll just let that payment go." If you're in a bar or something, you get along with a bartender, that one, just leave it go.
Yes.
For certain things, they're willing to bend the rules, right? And that's the stuff. But for that, no, they've got to follow the rules. It's like, well done, Karen cops. What's the male version of Karen?
I think it's a Ken.
Ken? Well done, Kens of the world. What are your opinions on violent resistance versus non-compliance? This is a great question. Darius, very, very good question. I don't know if you got any thoughts. I've got plenty of thoughts.
You go, please.
All right. So my opinion is it's very, very tempting, and the natural inclination is for us to lean towards violence, right? And violent resistance. But in my opinion, we just can't do it, right? Because they have the monopoly on violence, right? They have the police force, they have the military, and they have all these other bits and pieces, and they have the law and the media that will make us look like we're the instigators no matter what we do, right? Even if you're provoked, they only show the other side of the thing. So in my opinion, the only way that we can win this is with non-compliance, right? Peaceful non-compliance and mockery, really. Like, just troll the heck out of them, because these guys know deep down that they're enforcing bullshit.
Yes.
Right? I think there's a great article or great writing that's called "Live Not by Lies," right? And this is how you beat it. Just do not live by their lies. But in my opinion, it's kind of like Gandhi and everything. When he was up against the British Empire, he couldn't resist with violence because they would get stomped. And that, I believe, is the case for us as well. I want to, I have times where I'm like, man, I just want to lash out and that sort of stuff and get into it as well. But it's so counterproductive. It actually hurts the movement, because once one person does this, well, you look at what they do. Like even in the Canberra protests and things like that, most of the violence and the issues were coming from the locals towards the protesters, but then all they show is any sort of instigation from the protesters to the locals. So it's the natural, you got to resist the urge, right? it's like that donut you want to eat or that ice cream you want to eat. Like, man, it'd be easier and it'd be more delicious and tasty and that sort of stuff, but you've got to resist that temptation because it hurts the movement. Non-compliance is better, but I think the best way to resist this, and this is the way I'm leaning, is opting out of the system, right? And that sort of stuff. Just go goals. GG from Atlas Shrugged, right? It's another great book to read and everything as well. Because
put your resources into gold is what you're saying.
No, go Galt, as in who is John Galt from the book Atlas Shrugged.
I've never read it.
It's a great book.
You're just saying your own references here.
Oh no, they're not my reference. If you were a learned, educated man, you would know these things.
This is a house of learned doctors.
No, I believe go Galt, right? And what that saying means is basically you just remove yourself from the system and your resources from the system, and you have to let it go, because at the end of the day, when we're still participating in the system, we're propping it up, right? And I don't think there's any way of fixing the system as well. So we need to just remove ourselves from it as much as possible. Obviously, we can't completely do this, right? We're here, we're using computers, we're on the internet, all that stuff. But as much as possible, right? That's the best way I think that we can do this.
I think that my 2 cents worth on that would be, I believe that the best way to go about it is not violent resistance. It is non-compliance, but it's more of a peaceful, proactive resistance, if you ask me. So you want to be peaceful in your means to the fullest extent, but at the same time, you want to be proactive in your means as well. So I don't think that being apathetic about things is the best way to go. And I don't think just standing there and holding the peace flag and peace sign is the way to go, because we have to be maneuvering here. We have to be pivoting when we want to pivot. We just can't go out onto the streets and say, no more war, or whatever, because that hippie shit doesn't help anyone. So what you have to be doing is like, what can I do? What skills do I bring to the table? Am I a good communicator? Samir Banga, I'm a good lawyer. I can talk to people about legal things. Topher Field, very educated with politics and history and libertarianism. He can bring that to the field. Am I a good researcher? Do I like collecting data? Okay, I'm going to share some data. Can I talk to family and friends? Can I share things on my social media that are educated and informed and not just rambling? So I think that peaceful, proactive resistance for me is the way that I tend to look at things.
There's a great saying. I'm just trying to find this quote, and basically, I can't remember who said it, but it's, don't try to fight the old system. Build a new one that's so compelling that everyone has to go over to it. It's like, don't try to fight the old way of doing things. Build something new that's so different and compelling. Because I agree 100%. You can't be passive, right? And that's the thing. Definitely peaceful, but definitely you can't be passive. That's not going to help anyone. And that's basically what's gotten us to this point, right? The police that were passive, right, while they were enforcing this stuff. Everyone at each level, as it went down, what I think it just comes down to is it's going to start from the grassroots. People just saying no. Yeah, like just say no.
And also, I think that one of the most essential parts of this is rejecting politically correct authoritarianism and rejecting self-censorship, because this is happening so frequently now that people are self-censoring to the point where anything you say, where you think that somebody maybe in some parallel universe or on the other side of the world could potentially maybe get offended if they ever hear it, which they won't. So everything that we say can't go through this self-censorship that we're putting ourselves through these days. We have to be able to speak our mind. And we have to be able to throw our ideas into the public forum. And we have to be like, hey, guys, this is what I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. This is what I think. And like, we do this quite often. We'll put our ideas here. You guys can tell us what you think about it.
I was going to say, I'd love to get Darius's thoughts on this too, and anyone else who's watching live, what they think as well.
I think that rejecting political correctness is going to be essential in this, because I think that these two things really play a hand-in-hand role when it comes to the submission to higher, like an authority, and the submission to control. Self-censorship and political correctness, and acquiescing to the demands of the politically correct woke cancel mob will beat you into submission just as badly as the WHO or a government or whatever it is. So I think that just a bit of intestinal fortitude will not go astray, and people should be trying to find that within themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think also just being smart too. We have to be very, very intelligent with what we do and don't do. Pick your battles is probably the best way to put it as well. That if you get taken off the board in terms of chess and things like that, like we need to think of ourselves. We're all players on this board. Everyone has a role to play in certain things that we're good at and things like that, right? Whatever you're good at and whatever you can contribute. I think Maria Z said this a few weeks ago on our podcast. Whatever it is that you can do to contribute to the movement, do that, right? Not everyone can do a podcast. Not everyone can weld things, right? Do whatever you can do, but think of it as like a chessboard, and you need to. Sometimes it's worthwhile sacrificing yourself and you're going to whatever it is, but you got to look at whether that's going to be beneficial or not, and whether you being off of the chessboard. And what I mean by this is, if you're not smart at what you do, if you do end up getting either arrested or put into a quarantine camp and stuff like that,
shadow ban on Instagram,
or all those sorts of things, and TikTok. Yeah. Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Our content is only going. We've got nearly 12K followers on TikTok, but our content only goes to our followers now because I've had 4 community guidelines violations.
I didn't like just saying Winnie the Pooh or something like that, or
no, I think it was more. I posted a few videos with a bit of police brutality, and they really didn't like it.
I didn't like that. Okay,
yeah,
it's just because you didn't have BLM on there.
No, yeah, exactly right. I think that I wouldn't imagine there is any police brutality in China. So
not at all. No, not at all.
It'd be foreign to them.
100%.
Yeah,
they've never heard of it. That's true. They'd be like, "What is this?" But
no, exactly.
But we got to think about, if we do get taken off the board, you've got to make sure if you do that, it's got to be for a worthwhile reason, because while you're off the board, you can't help yourself, you can't help your family, those you care about, and also the movement as a whole as well. So, that's why I like the whole.
How
concept.
do you keep your skin in the game, stay in the game, and pivot
stay in the game, be smart, right? So that's exactly right. Jocko Willink talks about this a lot, right? So a lot of the time, he's a badass Navy SEAL and that sort of stuff, but he doesn't always fight, and quite often he advocates for running away in a street fight situation and things like that. Because, Navy SEALs, and also in particular the Special Forces, they fight dirty, and they only fight when they've got overwhelming odds, when they know they're going to win. Any other chance, they're backing off, right? So just save yourself for those things. So we're just got to be smart about this. But
it's true though. I mean, and it's never really worth the violence, and it's never really worth the fight. And it's a great analogy, because if you look at a street fight, you can oftentimes de-escalate with your words. If you're good enough with your words and your body language, and you can definitely avoid it happening. That's
there's no rules on the street fight either.
But sometimes you do get sucker punched, and I'm wondering, in terms of this analogy, if you get sucker punched, sometimes you got to get it back up and fuck them up.
Sometimes you do, yeah, correct. But the thing
so does that point come?
I don't. I think we're a long way from that point. I think we are a long way from that point, because at the same time, like, yes, sure. What we got to do, we got to be thinking ahead, right? This is the whole thing. So for us everyday people, right, we have our own jobs, we have our own businesses, we have our own everyday lives we're thinking about, and this is kind of like a part-time thing for most people at best, right? If at all. Most people aren't even thinking about this. We're up against an organization of people who this is all they do. They think about these things, and they're thinking and planning so far ahead. So we need to make sure we're thinking at least a few steps ahead. We can't obviously go all the way down, but we need to be thinking a few steps ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Gandhi's example is a horrible one. I can debate this one forever, but I can't type that much. Plus, probably ban you. Okay, mate, I'd love to hear why Gandhi's example is a horrible one.
I have heard that these exalted figures like Gandhi, for example, Nelson Mandela also did some serious terrorism with the African National Congress.
Right, really.
Mother Teresa as well has her critics. Like, these guys are all sort of not perfect by any means. But
no, I don't think anyone's ever perfect, right? And that sort of stuff. Churchill obviously had his critics and stuff like that too, but
exactly. And you look at these exalted figures throughout history, and it's actually a bit of an ego death when you look into them and you think, "Fuck, everything I've been told was to suit a certain narrative." What do we got here?
I think it's maybe it's a bot or something.
VUM today from Tarina. Maybe that might be a bit of a butt dial, but we appreciate the comment.
Thanks for the butt dial.
Appreciate the comment, nevertheless.
But look, my whole thing is, I think we're also moving more to like the Soviet era, right? So think about how the citizens there resisted and not revolted, but resisted the Soviet era, controls, right? There's black markets, there's the underground movements, and those sorts of things. I think that's where we're going to end up going to, and because the thing as well about this whole mess, right, that we're moving in, is it's part of some big trends here, right? So we have some massive trends in terms of the US as a declining power, right? China's a rising power. We have the likes of Trudeau and all the people who are already in place in government who love and look up to China and their model of things because it's more authoritarian. So kind of like the Ukraine example.
Trudeau literally says this.
He does, yeah.
I was listening to a conference literally yesterday where he was saying that China is like he looks up to their authoritarianism.
Correct. So British Empire was finished with India and was looking for a dignified exit. Read the South African Gandhi, stretcher bearer of the empire. I'll look into that for sure.
Yeah.
And look, I do agree as well. Like if the British Empire wanted to squash Gandhi, they would just do that and that sort of stuff. So yeah, probably timing is a big part of that. But again, my whole thing is, again, this is not being pessimistic and stuff. It's just being realistic. The trend is against us, right? So we need to, and by no means am I saying we give up fighting, we stop fighting. I'm going to push this to the very end. As we've said, this is a hill we're going to die on, right? But we also have to be smart and be prepared. It's like, Russia's, over the last few weeks, they've obviously, or week or so, they've invaded the Ukraine, but they were building up around there for a long period of time. So in my mind, they've built up all the resources and the assets in the right area. They've got the likes of Trudeau in, they've got Ardern, they've got all these different people that are in place right now, right, ready to rock and roll. And so we need to be prepared for the fact that they're going to attack, right, and that sort of stuff. So this sort of stuff, they're going to be trying all these things on us.
Yeah.
So again, we need to resist and push back as much as we can. We need to be intelligent about that, but also part of it is just, in my opinion anyway, it's just going gold as well, So we try to educate as many people, but the thing that really surprised me, I guess, over the last couple of years and really highlighted, was really distinctly highlighted, was that people don't want freedom. The majority of the people do not want freedom. They want to be looked after, right? So they'd rather give up some of their freedoms and things like that in order to be looked after by daddy government.
Oh yeah,
right. That's the majority of the population, right? Yeah. And so we are the minority. Those are sort of the free thinkers and all other stuff like that. Yeah. The free thinkers and that sort of stuff. So we are the minority, right? So, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we can't go thinking that people are going to start waking up all of a sudden and going, hey, we want to go against all this sort of thing here too. So my whole thing is we push, we resist, we be smart, right? Be the SEALs, right, or the commandos, right? Because they fight asymmetrically, right? Small, intelligent, badass teams can deal massive damage to the conventional forces and that's the stuff. So we need to think like that, in my opinion. So
and it's just we've had an unbelievable compliance and an unbelievable trust in the government. And this is, I sound like a broken record here, and I'm beating a dead horse because I'm just totally shocked by the amount of compliance that we've seen, the amount of people that have just absolutely, totally, and utterly trusted everything that the government has said.
100%. So Darius is saying Gandhi's pacifism allowed the British to create partition, wars with Pakistan, religious division, and a whole host of factors which have only benefited the bourgeoisie. Yeah, 100%. Well, look, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Darius, if you have any sort of options or solutions too. Because again, it's not that we're saying to be passive. Well, not my opinion anyway. My opinion is definitely not to be passive. We are actually probably a lot more proactive than what most people see. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes of these sorts of things than just these live streams and things like that. So, for example, Global Freedom Rally, there's a whole bunch of other things we're doing there as well. But definitely, they have a monopoly on violence, right? And I think, again, media and the monopoly on violence is a powerful thing, because essentially, when you think about it, even like you look at the Ukraine and the Russia right now, right? And the Russians are trying to show all these reasons to the general world to say, hey, look, this is the reasons why Ukraine's bad. And this is why we've had to, go do our thing. And Ukraine's trying to do the exact same thing. So you look, it's all propaganda. And that's really all the wars. But that's the same thing that we do as kids, right? I don't have any siblings, but I know people who do. And I used to play with friends and stuff like that, right? So you'd punch someone in the sibling, but then you go running after your parents first to try to get your word in to say, oh, no, they did this and they pissed me off and that's why I punched them and stuff. And they try to get the whole thing. It's the same thing on a global and national scale. It is human nature and things like that, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And so when the media is going to be the massive mouthpiece where that's all they're going to see and hear is the their side of the story, and the parents, quote unquote parents of the rest of the population aren't going to see their actual story. It's not a good. It's just, even though it's not the truth, right? It's just not. Yeah, I think they got a monopoly in power on violence, and also the media behind them like that, the mainstream media. We just have to be smarter, right? We have to be just more intelligent and fight back in different ways.
And we're going to learn a lot from this. If our civilization doesn't blow itself up, we're most definitely going to learn a lot from this. And we learned from, even though Gandhi, it might not be all squeaky clean, and he might have done bad things and whatever. He may have, and I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But the legacy of what he did was peaceful resistance. And it's sort of translated into future movements past that. And I think that we need to take examples from the past, and then we need to build upon that, and then we need to say what's suitable for today.
Yeah.
And we're right now we're dealing with people who have more power than anybody in human history combined.
Correct.
And that's the Facebook oligarchs and the Meta oligarchs and the tech oligarchs. And, the guys who, are at the head of the World Health Organization, and the guys who are at the head of the World Economic Forum.
Correct. The other thing too, is two things. Is you look at there's a mismatch of power, right? We're just everyday people, their police force and military and stuff. What did the Afghanis do with the US military? We'll bring a comment up in a second too, Darius. We saw that other one come in. But when you have a mismatch of power, you don't fight fire with fire. You got to fight things a little bit differently. And then the other thing is you need to think about the knock-on consequences, which is what a lot of people don't do. So let's just say, okay, you get violent or whatever the thing is, and great. What then happens? What's the knock-on effects of that? And then it's called first order and second order thinking. So second order thinking is, okay, this happens. What happens next? So we just need to think through those things as well. So Darius is saying, I lived in Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Australia. Australia is by far the most compliant. Yeah, 100%. You can actually get a vaccine passport for $30 in certain countries.
Of course, money talks over there.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And you can get anything you want. I haven't been to the Middle East for an extended period of time, but I've lived in Europe, lived in Asia, and you're totally right. When I was in Cambodia, you can kill somebody for money.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
wow.
You can get a bazooka also, and you can blow up a cow.
Wow.
For money. Like there's actually a shooting range for it.
Wow.
Anything you want, you've got the cash, you can do it. So it doesn't surprise me. I reckon there'll be someone on the block tomorrow who wants to make that vaccine passport for $28.
I just think the sad part about that is he's right that we are the most compliant country, and we're not supposed to be the compliant country. Topher Field actually said this on the first episode, I think it was, of the Contrarian Daily podcast, where the perception that we have of ourselves is 10 years old, right? And the overseas population's perception of us is 70 years old. Like they think of us back in the 70s, they're not 70s. They think of us as, Paul Hogan, Throw a Shrimp for the Barbie, Crocodile Dundee, and that sort of stuff. That's obviously not the case. And then we look at ourselves as being 10 years from what we were 10 years ago. But no, we are extremely compliant, and that's not good. It is not good.
And even when I lived in the UK, I mean, people overseas are just a little bit more inclined to understand politics and to understand what's going around. I remember I was in the UK and by this time I was from 19 to 22. I lived in the UK. Totally apathetic about politics.
Yeah, I know. Much better for us all.
I know, would have been now. but I was totally apathetic about politics. This is how bad I was, how much of a bubble I lived in. I worked at a bar. I lived in a warehouse, in like a repurposed warehouse, just partying all the time and boxing, and that's it. And then Brexit was happening, and I didn't know that Brexit was happening until the day that it happened.
Wow.
Like I went to work one morning and my general manager was like, "Oh my God, we're left the EU." And I was like, "What?" And then someone had to explain to me what Brexit was.
Right.
And then someone had to explain to me what it meant. I was like, "What do you mean you guys can't just leave Europe? What are you going to be your own continent?" And then I was so apathetic about it. But I did know that everyone else around me, all of my English friends, kind of knew what was going on. They were pretty in tune with it, and they understood the pretty bad economic state and the job crisis and the housing crisis. Whereas in Australia, people really don't care. And I think that there's almost a purposeful dumbing down of politics to the point where we believe that there's
education.
There's just a prime minister being usurped every 5 minutes and being stomped on. What happened with the Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd and Tony
Gillard
Abbott
again, and then Abbott, and then Turnbull, and whatever.
And I lost track. I did not know who was prime minister for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool. It's difference to me. Never really cared about that. But now when COVID happened, and when we started having to understand politics a little bit better, and when we had to start understanding our surroundings a little bit, and the decisions that are being made above that are going to impact us directly, all of a sudden people are becoming a bit more savvy to it. And I wonder, change happens slowly.
And then suddenly.
Yeah, exactly. But I wonder if we are going to see more of a politically savvy Australia moving forward, because like in the Middle East, for example, Darius,
they have to know.
Is totally right. Like I was saying last week, you've got Israelis who are just constantly under threat from countries
all
around
everywhere.
them.
Yep.
And you've got, Sharia law in some of those countries where they have to be real. Like blasphemy in a lot of countries is punishable by death.
Mhm.
So you really have to be on the ball and you have to be switched on, or else it could really cost you.
Big time, big time. Well, I think it sort of goes into what we were talking about last week as well, in terms of, we've had it good as a society. So then even if you bummed around and didn't do anything, your life would improve. And then obviously now we're sort of seeing the opposite. And that's the other trend I do see, is it's moving more towards self-reliance. Right. So, over the time we've grown up and, been raised in a society where you can just go to work, you'll get your retirement and superannuation and, all that other stuff. That's all going away. Right. And then we could also live in our own bubble here in Australia because we're separated from conflict. Right.
Yep.
That's all going away as well.
And potentially separated from like protection as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, again, we talked about this last week. The borders are gone, right? In terms of conflict, right? The USA was protected by the oceans. Now with cyber warfare and everything, no, they're equally a threat. So definitely the trend is more towards self-reliance, right? So we all need to be looking after ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves and our families and our loved ones and those in our community a lot more than what we had to in the past.
Yeah.
I think it's a big trend that we, which is why we're seeing a lot of people waking up and why we're seeing a lot of other people doing all the things they're doing as well. So what do you think about Dom Perrottet openly admitting that QR codes were a scam? I actually didn't see the I saw the article and I saw the videos and that sort of stuff. I haven't actually watched them.
What was the quote? Do you have a quote there, Darius? That'd be good to hear.
Let's actually bring it up, right? So it's on
Dom Perrottet has admitted that QR codes were a scam.
Yeah, actually might have been on GC. Here we go here. GTV2. So what we'll do, I'll share the screen. Let's watch it together, guys, and then we'll just get through this video ad.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see this because I think that it's the QR codes are a scam, but I'm wondering if it's in the data collection field that he's saying it's a scam, or if it's like they actually don't care and don't monitor it sort of thing that he's saying it's a scam. Let's skip to to the actual video there.
Yeah, let me just bring it up on the screen. Right, so this is GTV2. Just full credit to this guy here.
G'day guys, how you going? Hope you're doing well and taking care of yourself. Now a lot of us already understand that it's the framework that they put in place for the social credit system, but they are using it to manipulate the population anyway. Now I'll show you this quick video so you understand what I'm talking about, and I'll come back to you.
As Premier, one of the things that frustrates the Prime Minister a lot is that what we've seen during the pandemic is actual power of the states. They can go and do what they want when they want, and the Prime Minister's got to try and keep everybody together and bring where possible, bring a common outcome. But if we can strive to do that ourselves, so it's very clear to me early on when I became Premier, particularly when Omicron started, was that the relationship with Dan Andrews for me was going to be a particularly important one. I get criticised for being the open up guy. He gets criticised for being the lock it down guy. So if we could somehow work together and have similar settings in place, the ability for the media to criticise and instill fear in the community based on the approach that we were taking, we would take that off the table. So it was a strategic plan for both of us to mirror our settings where possible. And that has proven to be incredibly successful, because I think when you've got, particularly in the media, on any decision the government makes, it was the most ironic one I thought was we ended up bringing QR codes back when we weren't even tracking and tracing. There was no science behind it at all. It had zero utility. But there was a massive campaign, and when those massive campaigns get run, what it does, it depletes confidence. And that kind of reporting, as we've seen over this period of time, has depleted confidence in our people. So we actually brought it back for one reason only, to instill confidence so people would go out with using QR codes. But where Dan and I reached that agreement was, if we could come out on the same day with the same settings, whilst he would get attacked for not going far enough, and I'd get attacked for going way too far, we could work with each other to say, well, go look at Victoria, and they go look what Dom's doing in New South Wales, and it worked perfectly. Most ironic one I thought was, we ended up bringing QR codes back when we weren't even tracking and tracing. There was no science behind it at all.
So as you can...
All right, so we'll just end the video there. Just again, full credit to GTV2. That's what we were watching then. So not trying to steal people's content and stuff. So go check out his analysis of this as well. Obviously after the live stream. My view just straight away, like, is this has never been about science and health, and I think people can see that very, very clearly with all the different decisions, and this is just more proof of it. Again, might be maybe a little bit pessimistic with it, but where is the outrage? So why are we having to see it on a an independent news and media channel and that sort of stuff?
And let's hear about the rest of the scams as well.
Correct.
And also,
all the rest of them,
I want video footage of Dom Perrottet and Dan Andrews hanging out together, or I want to be a fly on the wall,
right?
Because I reckon that would be the worst, most boring, most vanilla conversation you've ever had.
Let's break it down, right? So he was saying a few things in there. So one of the things was they were also coordinating to try to, regardless of health, right, and what's right for health and that sort of stuff, just to help drive the media narrative, right? So they can both be criticized, one for being opened up, one for being locked down. They just wanted to come out with the same policy to reduce media, attacks and stuff. So first and foremost, they're not doing this for health, right? And then obviously bringing back the QR codes. Yeah, it's just control. That's what it all comes down to. And then again, even with the QR codes, like he was just saying, and thanks for bringing this up, Darius. I did see the video or the thumbnail earlier, I just didn't watch it. Again, they weren't even tracking and tracing. And this is the thing. I think as a society, as people, we've been bombarded with just so much stuff that people are just like, oh, another one, and then it just sort of goes and rolls by the wayside, which is incredibly dangerous. Right? We can't allow that sort of thing to happen. But there is no outrage. Right? And where is the outrage? Where is the outrage about all the other things? Where is the outrage about the mandates? Where is the outrage about the masks and that sort of stuff, the vaccine?
What about the fact that we still have to get an exemption to leave our country?
Correct.
And what about the fact that I just tried to inquire about going overseas today, and I've got to do 2 weeks quarantine when I get back because I'm unvaxxed?
Well,
I mean, the data is
even foreigners. So, like, I know some people from Canada, and because they're not citizens, they got long-term visas and they can stay here for years. But because they're not citizens, if they leave, they might not be able to come back in the country because they're not vaccinated as well. So, yeah, it's terrible. And again, it's what I think about it is it's just, again, more proof that the quote-unquote conspiracy theorists are always right and things like that. But also it shows the level at which society has fallen, in my opinion, which is why I'm leaning more towards build the communities with people who are like-minded, right? So don't be passive, but just consider building the communities with people look at ways to withdraw from the system, because that's also going to hurt the system as well. Like, for example, I think if everyone was to draw their money out of the banks, right, and just keep zero cash in the banks, that would do some damage to the system, right? Because if you know about fractional reserve banking, right, I think it's like in the USA at least, I don't know what it is here, but 1 to 10. So which means that for every $1 that's in the account, they can lend out 10, right? And they don't keep the cash for all the money that they've got, quote unquote, in their in the bank. So if I think it might even be like 1% or something that they keep there. So if everyone wants to pull their cash out, that would really cause a lot of trouble for the financial system and stuff like that too. So I think we need to, again, think very, very creatively about how we push back. But just the fact there's been no outrage about that, at least outside of this community, it's terrifying for me and disgusting. It's just disgraceful. So
yeah. No, I'd ask the same question. Where's the outrage? And I mean, it's just everything kind of falls on deaf ears these days. And yeah, you wonder when the outrage will come, because if you look at it where we were a year ago and all of the even when I was telling that story before about the fact that I was sitting there and then somebody came over on the police came over on their little tractor or whatever you could call it.
A little moped thing, whatever?
Yeah. No, it's like a little golf buggy.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, it was even worse. Very Orwellian, the golf buggy. Right. And told me to put a mask on. It's like, this is crazy. And it's like why were we put through this,
Mm-hmm. It's terrible. What I'm just pulling up this thing. So Ray Dalio, I think we talked about him last week as well. Basically, he's got a book called The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. And in here, he's got these trends. He's got like eight different trends he looks at. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to share the screen now. I've got it on my phone here. I took screenshots. And so when he's evaluating the health, like economic health and things like that of countries and things like that, he looks at these things. So what is the economic and financial position? So the first thing he looks at is the debt burden. Right, so you look at the countries in the West. We have extremely high debt burdens.
Trillions and trillions.
80% of all US dollars was printed in the last 2 years.
Oh, what?
Yeah, 80% of all US dollars in existence was printed in the last 2 years.
No wonder their inflation's
And then, I don't know if you guys saw, again, from Biden, they were blatantly lying about the cause of inflation. They were saying that doesn't actually, Kamala Harris or whatever it is.
That's just not true.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, what do you think? Like, you pour more into the economy, more money into the economy, you build more cash, you put into the economy, it devalues the currency.
Go back to bed, Biden. But and then the other thing he looks at with economic thing is debt burden and expected growth, right? So if you look at, again, the Western civilization as a whole, where's our growth going to come from? It's mainly going to be tech, but we're going to be destroyed in a lot of areas from AI and automation. So that's what he looks at there. Then he also looks at internal order, right? So what is the order like within the country? Is there a lot of division or is there a lot of unity? We're pretty divided in amongst the West here. Then he looks at the external order. So that's obviously the order between countries. And obviously we've got rivalries rising with China, Russia, and all those other bits and pieces. And then he also looks at things like 8 key measures of power. So the markets and the financial center, which basically means, are you the reserve currency in the world? So right now the USA is the reserve currency, but it's the confidence of that is actually declining, right? It's not on the rise. Innovation and technology. I would say that's one place, and he also says that too. Well, I should say he says that, and I also agree, because I'm definitely no Ray Dalio. But the thing is, innovation and technology is on the rise in the USA, right? But it's not necessarily a good thing. But then he looks at the education system. Is the education system in the USA and Australia, is it good or bad? It's pretty damn messed up, right? You got the critical race theories and all those other bits and pieces going on right there.
It's an indoctrination system these days.
Yeah, it's all just propaganda. It's not actually education. So all these things, like military strength, the reserve currency status, the economic output, the trade, and all these other bits and pieces he looks at as the trends. If you just look at that across the countries and our societies, it's all not looking in the right direction, right? So before we can even look at going back to the way things used to be, we have to pull these things around and turn them all around, and that's a big task, right? And you can't do that without cooperation throughout the whole thing. So anyway, where I was going with this though is the trend is, not in the right direction.
A downwards one.
Yeah, so it's a downward trend, right? And that sort of stuff, which is why I'm looking at, okay, look, we fight, we resist, we don't make it easy and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, you've got to look at it and go, you can't fight trends. So how do we adapt and live the best way, in the current trend, if that makes sense? So
I guess, that's what I mean by pivot,
Yeah, it's
sometimes you're looking
100%.
one way, you got to pivot, and you have to sort of see what's happening, know that you can only have X amount of impact, and then what can I do to better my situation, my family's situation, while still sort of maintaining the moral sort of alignment.
Yeah, I think it's the Serenity Prayer, whatever it is, from Alcoholics Anonymous,
Yeah.
What was it? Like, give me strength to change what I can.
Change what I can.
Give me the courage.
Understand what I can't.
And then
the courage.
The wisdom to know the difference. That's right, exactly. Yeah. And so, like, I think, again, like, so we're going to look at it from like a very...
shit out of that.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
No, I'm not feeling very serene after that. Actually, I feel quite anxious. That's right. But look, I think we've got to think strategically about these things too, right? And so, look at it from all the different perspectives. So from their perspective, they can see all the communication that we've got. I think we talked about this a bit last week too. We can't see any of their communication, right? They've got all the resources and all these other bits and pieces. So they have all these things. But just like the Afghanis or Afghans and things like that, and countless other groups won against superior things, we can do the same, but we can't fight fire with fire, right? So we have to think differently.
We don't have the resources.
No, correct. That's exactly right. And so, in my opinion, I think the way that we win this is each individual person and family and community gets strong and independent, right, as much as possible. Because if we're independent, they can't control us. They can't compel you to do things.
Yes.
If you've got your options in terms of financial, economic, or relationships, all that sort of stuff, and they say, "Great, we're going to do a digital bank, currency, whatever it is," the stuff we were talking about earlier in the show. Great, okay, cool, right? But because I've got my independence, I can buy some alcohol bottles. We were talking about this before the show. Someone else who's actually plugged into the system, great, I'll give you some alcohol if you go buy that thing using your cryptocurrency or your central bank digital currency and stuff like that. So we need to think differently, and the more independent we can be, the more of a thorn in their backside, we are definitely going to be as well.
Hey,
actually,
Bree.
hold on. So we got Bree. Okay, COVID hysteria has. So is this Bree?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, great.
So Bree's going to be coming on the podcast tomorrow, guys.
Yeah. So I think last week, if you saw last week, they announced that it was going to be last Wednesday. Do you want to share what happened there at all, mate? Or?
Yeah, so I actually drove to the wrong location. I was
Yeah.
meant to go to Bree's studio and go and film from there, but then I went to the totally wrong location. I actually blame Bree because she sent me the text and I clicked on the text. I don't double check.
All right, so Bree, you should have known that he doesn't double check, and just double check. But Bree says COVID hysteria has become a religion. 100%, yes. The reason people comply is because they are following their Bible instructions given to them by our bureaucratic premiers. And psychology 101: sheep need a shepherd, and it's a shame it's silly premiers. Yeah, 100%. And that's why there's been a war on religion, all this time, right, to get people away from this. Yeah, there you go.
Good point. This is true. Great. Attention to detail is not on point.
There's a bit of discrimination there.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie.
I mean, Chris will know that my attention to detail is very minuscule.
It is very, very minuscule. I think there's the appropriation there and that sort of stuff. So if we're all equals and stuff, does that mean that women are also not so good at that?
No, I mean, there's no difference between men and women. We all know that.
That's right, exactly. Well, this is just proof that women are superior.
Yes.
Yeah, in every way.
Women are superior, but there's no difference between men and women at the very same time.
That's right. But then how can you get paid more than women, though? That's the other thing, too. And you don't even...
Because the pay gap, bro. Because science, bro.
That's ridiculous. But look, I think you got a very, very good point there, Bree, as well. We were talking about this last week, too, that, we used to say in the name of God. Now it's in the name of science. It is the new religion. And people need a shepherd the most when they're afraid, right? So if things are going well, you don't need a shepherd because things are going well. But then it's like, oh man, this is going on over there. This is going on over there. Help me, shepherd. That's usually what's going on. All right. So Bree is saying, I actually prefer being in the kitchen. I make a great sandwich.
Well, maybe I'll get a sandwich tomorrow.
Where's my sandwich going to be? That's the thing.
Sorry, man. You got to do the hard yards and come to Brisbane if you want.
I feel very disappointed, actually. Disappointed.
I'll bring you on next week.
Thank you. That'd be great.
You don't know what kind of sandwich?
What, a shit sandwich?
Knuckle sandwich.
Knuckle sandwich. No, well, look, but yeah, it's a very, very good point, though. Psychology 101. There's I think we talked about this as well, but it's problem, response, solution, right? So usually what will happen is these people in power will they'll create a problem, but they know is going to get a typical response. And then they're going to come in with their solution to fix the response that they instigated themselves, right? I have no idea what this person here is saying.
That's the second...
We're getting botted here with some comments and stuff. And if this is a genuine comment...
Oh, it's Russian.
Yeah, if it's
Give us a bit of
comment,
insight.
I don't over there. I apologize if it's a genuine person. The FYI, so VUR, I'm not sure what the reference is to this. If you want to comment and enlighten us, that would be fantastic.
Yes, please. Can you pronounce that name for me?
Vodka? Ruski. No, I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm ready.
A lot cooler than my name, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. But look, yeah. Yeah, Chris is a great name.
Yeah,
it's a classic name. Christopher. Yeah, Christopher Columbus. There's a lot of Christophers. Great Christophers.
Hitchens was a great one.
Chris Pratt. That sort of stuff. What's Chris Hemsworth?
Chris Hemsworth.
There's a lot of good Chris's out there.
Yeah,
I'm obviously on their level.
My mum named me after a TV show guy that she had a crush on.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, who was the character or something?
His name was Jake.
Okay, great. Okay, Jake.
So thanks for that, Mum.
Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or
I don't know. Apparently, he wore a leather jacket and used to ride a motorbike.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Do you do either?
No.
Okay. Right.
I used to wear leather jackets and a fedora.
And a fedora. We gotta get this.
I've got a photo of it.
Look, we want to keep our viewers okay. So.
Look, I think that's a good place to end it. To be honest, about my leather jacket, my fedora. Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys, and make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening: Spotify, YouTube. All the good stuff. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, well, this has been a good discussion, actually. I think key things: think about being self-reliant, independent, think smart and strategic, and again, just fight, but in intelligent ways, right? Don't just be a silly, person who just goes and does something
Some
silly.
dumb shit. Yeah.
That's right, some dumb stuff that then causes trouble. So be intelligent with what you're doing and think a couple of steps ahead.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow. If you guys want to tune in, 11:30 a.m. is when me and Bree are going to be going
have the
live.
right
We're going
address
to be
this time,
talking.
right?
I'm going to have the right address.
Okay,
I'm going to go there. It's going to go all smoothly, knowing me. And yeah, we're going to be talking about mental health. We're going to be talking about lockdowns, etc. So looking forward to that. And I'll see you then, Bree, if you're still on this stream.
Cool. All right, bye for now, guys.
See you guys.